Thank you so much for joining today. I'm so excited to be talking with you. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us about your nonprofit journey? What led you into this work and what keeps you inspired today?
Sure. Thank you, Nicole, so much for having me. My name is Susan Kahan. I'm the founder and principal of Sapphire Fundraising Specialists, which is a consulting business working with established nonprofits on their fundraising strategy. We do a lot of work on assessing how development operations and teams are functioning. We do a lot of training for staff and board on fundraising and solicitation skills. And then we also work with development teams on major gifts, planned giving, capital campaigns sometimes, other board work, just overall, how can they raise more money primarily from individual donors? And we've been in business about 4.5 years. So it's really exciting, approaching fifth year, which feels like a dream. But my journey started. I think almost every child is asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And mine, I never had an answer for that. I never knew what I wanted, but I always knew I wanted to do something that would help people. And years later, I realized that my skill set and what I really wanted was to work for a nonprofit. That to me made sense. That was a way of helping others. And I think a lot of that also comes from several members of my family were very involved with a few different charities as volunteers. And so I saw it firsthand. So I've been involved with nonprofits ever since interning in college and then working in nonprofits right out of college. And then until I started my company. And now I basically exclusively work with nonprofit organizations. And then what inspires me, so many things, but two things I really deeply believe in, which is one that small iterative progress can make and lead to big change and big
Mhm.
impact. And so I think sometimes those small things helping one person going community by community, step by step can really lead to a big change. And the second thing is that I think at the end of the day, most people are good and want to help others. And so my focus is on fundraising. And so when it comes to talking with donors, I think people are like, oh, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to nudge them. I don't want to do this. But it's like, look, if someone cares about your cause, chances are if they can be helpful and they can be financially supportive, they will do it. So it's all about framing it as how can you give people the opportunity to make a difference?
I love that. And I think it's so important. You said a few things. Small impacts or small changes make big impact. I think that's such a huge consideration or a huge kind of value or perspective from a lot of nonprofits. Like one
Yes.
small movement can really move that needle, and it's so
Yes.
important. I
Yes.
also love that you started your nonprofit journey back in college and university. Like that's I find so many people find themselves in that space, and they like oftentimes don't know the direction they want to go into or what career or path, and then they find a nonprofit and they stay there.
Yeah.
Because they're like, this is it. I didn't know what it was, but this is it. It was
Yeah.
the exact same thing that happened with me. And I was like, I've been in it since. And I love it. I love the work. And I think I hear so many people that have that similar kind of start where they didn't really know. And then all of a sudden they found it and it all
It
makes
just
sense.
clicked. It just clicked. And what's also interesting is when I was in college, I thought I would be more on the communications and marketing side. And so that's where I thought I would end up. And then when I graduated college, and this, dates me, I graduated at a time where the economy was really tough. Very different than now, but a different, very difficult economic time of a recession. And it was really hard to find a job. And so I applied for so many different jobs in all these different areas, communications. And I found this one job in fundraising. And I joke sometimes, no one, again, when you're a little kid, they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? No one says, I want to be a fundraiser. Like that just isn't what people say. But I fell into it and I thought this really gels well with my skill set, what I'm interested in. It was exciting to me. So it was really a great fit.
I love that. That's awesome. So, when you think about your career and the path you've taken, what part of the work really lights you up the most? Is there like a specific project or a story or an impact moment that you can think of that you're like, yes, this is what gets me jazzed and excited?
Yeah. Well, my background is in fundraising and I did mainly major gift work. And then I led a team and then I went off on my own. And so, what I really love and what I've learned is I love doing trainings. I love helping others to gain skills so that they can do it. I think there's a lot of hesitation, fear, lack of confidence around fundraising, around talking with major donors. And
Mhm.
when I can be in a meeting and I can push people a little bit outside of their comfort zone to get them to try to act out what would this conversation with this potential donor look like, and really get them to think through. I love doing that. I That really lights me up. I really want people to feel more comfortable and confident in their roles. And the other thing about that is I think sometimes people are like, well, they're trying to talk to these people who are so wealthy, and what can I talk to them, and how do I build a relationship? And look, at the end of the day, they're just people. There are people who have the same worries and concerns and the same things that light them up just like anyone else. And it's just about getting to know them and giving them a way to show their values. And I think that's the thing about fundraising and nonprofits in general is that how you budget, how you spend your money is a demonstration of your values. And so if you can show to a potential donor, look, you really care about this cause. Here's how you can demonstrate that financially and really lead to some small or big change over time. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, it really is. I think fundraising can be intimidating. You're asking
Definitely,
somebody to potentially
definitely.
give some of their time, money, resources, whatever that is.
Absolutely.
And I think you hit the nail on the head when the value alignment. You're asking somebody to actually support a value that they already have, and finding that right organization is part of the fun, or the
Yeah.
trick of fundraising is making sure that it actually aligns with their values. Not everyone's going to be a good donor for you,
No,
and that's
not at all. And I always give an example. I'm not a big animal person. I have nothing against animals, but I've never been a big animal person. So if someone were to come to me and say, "We have this amazing shelter. We do all these things for the dogs and cats and other pets in the community that don't have a home," I'd be like, "That's great. I'm not your donor." Because people at the end of the day, they can only give to so many things. They can only prioritize so many things. And for me, that's not my priority. I know other people care deeply, and I think that's amazing, but I'm not the big donor for them, and that's okay.
yeah, I agree. And I think knowing that, and then sometimes like donors don't even know where their values, not values,
Yes,
but where they actually want to, where they can leave their legacy, I think, and
yes,
like that impact that they actually can make. And then sometimes it's somebody like yourself or a fundraiser who just helps them, coach them along that journey. I agree with you. I think a lot of people are genuinely good and want to leave that legacy. So I think a fundraiser's role is really around building those connecting dots and like giving them the pathway on this is what it could look like, and it finding that alignment for them. So
yeah,
I love that. I think it is an intimidating role, but it's an
it is.
important role, and I think it
Yeah,
actually creates like lasting values, legacy, all of those components for them, for the organization and their families. So kudos to you, because that's a fun task to have.
yes,
It can be challenging though, which
yeah.
ties into my next question. What's one challenge or shift you're currently navigating in your organization or in the sector as a whole? How are you approaching it, and what kind of support would help in that space?
Yeah, I think look, honestly, I think the sector right now is facing massive changes and
Yeah.
massive challenges, and so it's hard to just pin down one thing sector-wide. But one thing I think is really critical, and I'm based in the United States, so most of my knowledge around this stuff is US based, but I know you're in Canada, and I think Canada is pretty similar on this on a couple of these things. But number one is we have an aging population. And I think this is actually a global trend, but we have an aging population. And there's a couple of impact effects from that. So, number one, in the United States, I think it's somewhat true in Canada, but again, I'm less sure. In the United States, the eldest generation, the baby boomer generation, those
Mhm.
born right after World War II into the 1960s, they have the largest holder of wealth.
Yeah.
So, for many nonprofits, their largest donors are all over 60, and younger generations have less money. And this is leading to a whole bunch of things. So, one, you have younger people, it's harder for them to donate because they have less disposable income. And when you think about not just income, but net worth,
Yeah.
there is huge income inequality, which again, it's like all kind of connected. And this leads to less people donating. And while donations are going up, it's because a few big donors are giving tremendous amounts, which is amazing, but there's so much competition. So I think this is all going to lead to fewer nonprofits, which could be a benefit, it could be a good thing. But I think just thinking through that competition for dollars from some of these older, aging donors. And the other thing with this aging population that I'm seeing a lot is there were a lot of nonprofits that were founded, let's say in the 1970s, the 1980s, maybe even the 1990s. And those founders are ready to retire.
Yeah.
And they don't know who's going to take over for them. And there's even a question of should we continue? So I think there's just a lot of generational change, wealth inequality, and then the final major challenge is technology. I think you can't talk about challenges at nonprofits without talking about technology. AI can do some amazing things. Also, people are really nervous that they're going to lose their jobs from it, and they're not wrong. Frankly, I think again, where people are working is really going to change. So I think all of these things all combine with competition for dollars, technology changing how we work and who's doing what, and just what nonprofits will continue, I think are just like major forces all happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's completely fair, and I agree with you. I think there's so much change at this current moment that what we have done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that's not gonna work anymore, and we have to think differently. So if
Yes,
it's merging or consolidating nonprofits, if it's thinking of
exactly.
fractional workers and support
Exactly.
staff that are helping 3 or 4 different nonprofits in HR or whatever that is. I think I agree with you. We have to think differently, and then technology can be a benefit, but it also could be like we have to stay not ahead of it because it's almost impossible to stay ahead of it, but at least stay
Yeah.
with the trends
Yes.
because the for-profit sector is they're running that space.
They're
So the
yes.
nonprofit sector has to at least be able to keep up or stay
Yes.
on point with what's happening, especially trying to reach the younger generations. They're very savvy.
Yeah.
Now, the older generations, I agree with you. They like very similar in Canada. Like
Yeah.
we do have an aging demographic, but I think they're also quite savvy.
Yes.
They know how to use the tools. They want to
Yes.
use the tools. They are staying on top of those trends as well. So I think the nonprofit itself just has to think differently because I
Yes.
think we're stuck in our ways
Yes.
and we can't be
Well,
anymore.
I think you really are. Cannot agree with you more that nonprofits, even the most progressive, like forward thinking missions, aren't always the most progressive, most forward thinking operations.
Yeah.
And this is I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from a nonprofit, from a client or someone I'm talking to, and they're like, well, this is the way we do it. And it's like, why? Do you have to keep doing it that way? Is that just how you do it? It's like, well, that's how we do it. I'm like, okay, but is there any possibility? And you go, again, I'm always about the small change. Is there any way we can make it a little different? Not
Yeah.
totally change, but a little different. And that change is really hard. I think a lot of nonprofit boards are really risk averse and
Yeah.
don't allow for investment for change and to try things. Big new change can be expensive, and I understand that that can be really limiting. But what if you pilot a project? What if you try something? What if you test something for 6 months, a year, get some data? Most change doesn't happen overnight, and I think nonprofits need to be thinking about, well, technology, look, we're not going back from AI.
Yeah.
We're on a virtual call in 2 different countries talking at the same time, which sometimes, that's kind of really cool when you think about it.
Yeah.
10 years ago, maybe you could do something like this, but it'd be low bandwidth, like it wouldn't work. So imagine what it'll be like 10 years from now. I don't
Mhm.
think we can even imagine some of these changes that will be happening to our work life. I also think about, I'm younger than this, but when people started having computers on their desks, like there was this period not too long ago that people didn't have computers on their desks at work, and I try to think, so what did they do all day, So I think we're at that same stage where we are going through a massive technological change, and organizations and nonprofits need to be thinking about, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to adapt? How can we test things? Because if we don't look forward, we may not survive it.
I totally agree. I think there's this whole concept too around like boards tend to be risk averse, like you said. And
Yes.
then like testing innovations or thinking a little differently is scary and
Yes.
or they're not willing to make those changes. And I think that has to change in itself. Like we need to think really differently and innovation or not being afraid to fail because I know nonprofits also don't do failure well or we don't talk about it, we don't celebrate it, we don't learn from it, we don't talk to each other about it, and I think
Yes.
that's like a fundamental flaw of us, the
Yes.
nonprofit sector,
Right.
is like learning from the mistakes and actually like sharing them and being like we tried this and it did not work.
Nicole, you are so right. I think trust is a huge, again, I think from a fundraising lens always. And so if you're not going to donate dollars voluntarily to an organization you don't trust, maybe you'll do it once, but you won't do it twice. And you're not going to increase your giving. So showing and demonstrating trust when we are in a world, in a state where institutional trust, whether that's government, people we don't know, things on the internet, just we don't trust things right now. And again, there's a lot of good reason for that. There's a lot of scammy, spammy things out there. So nonprofits need to demonstrate trust. And part of that is being honest when you try something and it doesn't work. If I were to say, we tried this thing and we raised $1 million from it, but in reality, we lost $100,000, you'd be like, what? Like, and you figure that out later, you would be like,
Yeah,
you're a total liar. That's not real. So I think showing, you know what, we tried this thing. We hoped it would do this. This was the goal. This was the intention. It didn't work out the way we wanted. In reality, it cost us this much, but this is what we learned and this is what we're going to do better the next time.
yeah,
And I think that builds trust and is such a key thing for nonprofits right now.
yeah, I 100% agree because I think trust is on the decline, unfortunately, across the board
Absolutely.
in like every area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think those are really interesting perspectives, and I'm so curious how nonprofits move into that space a little better in the future, for sure,
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
think, and I'll just say, I think some of it has to be allowing for time to discuss. How
Yes.
can we demonstrate trust better? How can
Yeah.
we use technology to our advantage to be innovative, to take some risks responsibly? And I think also allowing for voices that maybe don't always get heard. You usually, the board is involved, the department heads are involved, the C suite, depending on the size of the organization. Sometimes the best ideas might come from someone you may not expect when it comes to innovation and change. And there was someone, I was with an organization and someone who like answered the phones and was the greeter because they had a lot of visitors, and so this person was like the front desk person. They had an idea about improving something and it's like, oh, they no one would have thought it because that person had a view, a visual view of the office in a way no one else did.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so they bring something, and I think it's important to listen to them and try things out.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's listening to everybody and different perspectives and voices, I think is so crucial.
Yeah.
So this kind of ties into it because I think there's something really interesting about the nonprofit hive as a whole and that one-to-one connection. So I'm
Yes.
curious, how have conversations or connections through the nonprofit hive helped shape your perspective? I feel like there's this ties into what some of the challenges were that we were talking about and how like just one-to-one conversations could change some of those pieces.
Definitely. Well, I think the best way to build a relationship with someone is to talk to them one on one.
Yeah.
So I am a big believer in building relationships with new people all the time. Yes, I do that for my business, but also in a fundraising sense, like it's really important that you're able to talk to people you don't know. So
Yeah.
if you're a fundraiser, just getting the experience of talking about your organization to someone who has no knowledge of it and getting that experience can be a really great benefit. And for me, I love learning about other people. I love learning what their challenges are. I also think you can read a lot of articles, you can read the big data. That is not always apparent at the individual organization or individual employee level. And I think being able to talk to people from literally all over the world and hear what they're working on, hear what they're doing, you never know where that conversation can lead. And again, you never know what can inspire and ideas inspired. I always try to be helpful whenever I can. But yeah, I like the idea of people in this sector around the world having other people they can talk to and just get to know with no, it's not like an agenda. Oh, I want to get something out of it. It's just
Yeah.
talking to people. And I think, again, even though we are such a connected world, sometimes we are just in our phones and we're not talking to people. And I think getting to know people of different backgrounds, different countries, different races, different genders, all the things, different beliefs. I think it's really important that we're not so siloed in our own little bubbles.
Yeah, and I love that. I think there's something really you said, like, you get to almost practice the
Yes.
idea of talking about your organization, and I think people take that for granted sometimes. And when you're talking to another person who works in nonprofit, they kind of get it, right? Like, you can use it as that testing space.
Yeah.
Or what we were talking about earlier, like, you could share some of the things that you may have tried and it didn't work, and you get to have real honest candid conversations with people in the sector who already get it. And I think
Right.
that is something that's been missing for me. And like, and I always feel like we're always in competition with one another in the sector. So it's like this also removes some of that barrier as well. And it really created opportunity to just share the real realities of what they experience on a day-to-day basis. So I like what you were saying there for sure.
Yeah.
So to wrap it up, what's one insight, resource, or mindset that has helped you recently? And what might help others in the community too? I'd love to hear what's working for you right now.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I don't know when this will be shared, but it's holiday season, end of year. And I think right now people are always busy. Like when do you meet someone, they're like, oh, I have nothing going on. Very rarely. But I think what's important to remember is you have no idea what someone else is going through, especially someone who you don't know that well, or a colleague even. Like you don't know, were they late to work because there were all this traffic or an accident or someone got in their way or they're caring for a sick family member or something just obnoxious happened to them right before or they just read something that angered them. Like you
Mhm.
have no idea right before a conversation or an interaction, you have no idea what else that person just experienced. And I take this very personally sometimes, and I'm trying to not, but most people's their happiness or their anger is usually has nothing to do with another person. It's usually
Yeah,
what's happening internally.
yeah,
And so just remembering that don't take things too personally sometimes and remember that again, I know a lot of my fundraisers that I work with right now, they're trying to call donors and they're busy and it's like again, just remember they have a whole life going on and they're not expecting your phone call. And so they may be gruff with you, they may be short with you, but that's not because of you or your organization. That's because maybe their boss just said something to them or their wife or whatever. Like you have no idea. So to just not take things too personally.
I think that's a really good reminder too when people are making those asks because it can be so intimidating that it's like, so that conversation may not have gone as well or as expected as you might have imagined, but
Yes.
try again.
Try again. And again, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And again, we all are dealing with things. Like we are all busy. We all have priorities and things in our lives. And I think that you just don't know what someone is top of their mind. And so especially when you call someone, you're having a meeting with someone and you hadn't seen them before, give people the benefit of the doubt. Again, at the end of the day, people for the most part are generally good and keep that focus and just try to be authentic and honest and transparent like we talked about. And I think over on the most part, you'll do just fine.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining me. That was such a nice conversation. And I
Yeah.
think it's brought me some good reminders on how to proceed when I am making some of those asks with my
Yes.
clients as
Yes, you can do it. That's the most important thing is
well.
like you don't get what you don't ask. Another thing, you don't get what you don't ask for.
True.
So you just never know. But thank you so much for this opportunity, Nicole. It was really fun.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Susan.